Hi, everyone. This is Dino Scaros, and we are SOPHIA, the Society of Presidential Historians in Academia. To find out more about us, just scan the QR code here or visit our website, sophiascholars.com. Today is January 20th, 2026, and we are very pleased to have with us Ronald Shafer. He was a longtime columnist for the Wall Street Journal, uh, political columnist. He's also an author, and I think he can do a much better job introducing himself. So I'm going to let Ron take over. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. This should be fun. I was a reporter and editor at the Wall Street Journal for somehow 38 years, mainly in Washington. I wrote the page one column, the Washington Wire, uh, at the Wall Street Journal. I'm retired now in Williamsburg, Virginia. But for the last decade or so, I've been writing history articles for the Washington Post. So I'm still involved in writing about current or past events. And right now I'm writing for the Williamsburg paper for the 250th anniversary of America this year. Uh, and I'm writing about what that same paper reported in 1776. So I cover a lot of territory.
That is absolutely wonderful, and we're very, very pleased to have you. So Ron is just has so much knowledge, and we only have a limited time on these podcasts. We certainly hope to invite him back for another one. But today we're going to focus on presidential humor, and Ron is going to share some stories with us about presidents that come to mind regarding the use of humor. So take it away, Ron.
Yeah, most presidents try to use humor. Some are good at it and some not so good at it. Uh, for me, one of the best that I covered was President Ronald Reagan. And there were three reasons why he was good at it. One, he was an actor, so he knew how to deliver the lines. He was, of course, he was in Bedtime for Bonzo. I'm sure you all saw that one. But he also used it to help himself on issues. And most of all, he had a natural sense of humor, which he showed literally under fire. I mean, I was an editor at the Wall Street Journal in Washington in 1981 when the reporter called in and said Reagan had been shot. So he was okay, but they were taking him to the hospital. So they wheel him into the hospital, and the surgeons are waiting for him. And Reagan looks up and he says, I hope you are all Republicans. And happened to be actually the lead surgeon was a Democrat that day, but he was ready to go. He said, "Mr. President, today we're all Republicans," and he was okay. And when he told his wife Nancy about what happened, he said, "I forgot to duck." And he would remember this line where something the old fighter Jack Dempsey said when he got knocked to the canvas. But the point is that Reagan kept his sense of humor even when he got shot. So I think that said a lot about what type of guy he was. But he also used it. He was the oldest president up to then, and by the time he ran in his second term, he was in his mid 70s. So he had to deflect the age issue, and he was good at it. I remember this one line that I used in my column actually. When he announced for his second term, he said, "Just to show you how youthful I am, I plan to run in all 13 states." And he kept going. He couldn't stop. He said, Thomas Jefferson once said, we should never judge a president by his age, only by his works. And ever since he told me that, I've stopped worrying about it. But he also used it humor in a serious way, and this is why it worked for him. That year, he debated with Vice President Walter Mondale, and he opened the debate by saying, I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience. So he got off to a good start by Mondale, and of course, he won the election that year. But he basically just used jokes to move his administration along. Of course, he was known as the Gipper, because once he had played a Notre Dame football player, George Gipp, in a movie. So his theme always was win one for the Gipper. So he would say things. I've wondered at times what the Ten Commandments would look like if Moses had run them through Congress.
Hmm.
Or he said, Republicans believe every day is the 4th of July, but the Democrats believe every day is April 15th.
Hmm.
Or he said, in government, nothing lasts longer than a temporary government program.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in the instances of humor where he said things off the cuffs, such as the "Honey, I forgot to duck" and the "I hope you're all Republicans," which obviously were not written by a speechwriter. Those just came to him not only naturally, but in a moment of tension, to say the least, of crisis. So. What do you think about that as far as how Reagan compares to other presidents who've told jokes, but we don't know if they were fed the jokes versus coming up with them themselves?
Yeah, that was his advantage. He was a good ad libber with jokes because he actually had a good sense of humor, and so he could do both. Actually, he could actually just come up on the cuff, or sometimes he would write them out ahead of time if he was planning something, because this was part of his appeal. One I remember was the first time he ran. He ran against President Jimmy Carter, and naturally start arguing a debate. And Carter brought up his charge. He said that Reagan was against programs to help the elderly. Now, if that came up in a debate these days in politics, you'd probably see the other person say, "Well, that's a big lie. You're a total idiot," and the thing would just go off the rails. But what Reagan did when Carter said that, uh, he's kind of smiled and he said, "There you go again," and just kind of diffused the whole argument. And then he gave his side of that he did support some programs, just not the one Carter was talking about. In this case, Reagan had written that out ahead of time and practiced it, just in case something like that came up, and it worked. In fact, it worked so well that the next debate, he was debating Mondale, and this time Mondale accused him of wanting to raise taxes. So Reagan kind of sighs and he says, I wasn't going to say this at all, but I can't help it. There you go again." And then he went on to say, "I don't plan to increase taxes," and so forth. So in both those cases, what he did was take a hot issue and turn it in his favor, but not by screaming and yelling, but just by being funny about it. So I think that was his real strength as the Gipper.
Right, and that's wonderful, and it's interesting because I know the debates very well. My own PhD was in the impact of presidential debates on elections, and I just loved watching those debates, and particularly the Reagan ones. And I'm so glad you brought up those moments. Next on your list, who comes to mind as a president who used humor successfully?
Well, I think number one has to be John F. Kennedy. Uh, Kennedy was the first president I ever saw, and he followed, of course, a couple very traditional presidents, Eisenhower and Truman. So suddenly, this would be 1960, goes back a little while. Here you have this young guy in his early 40s. He's lively, he's handsome, and he's funny. Uh, when he was nominated by the Republicans, his response was, "Do you realize the responsibility I carry? I'm the only person standing between Richard Nixon and the White House."
Mhm. Mhm.
But what we didn't really know until later was that JFK's father, Joseph Kennedy, very wealthy man, of course, paid a popular comedian, a guy named Mort Sahl. to write jokes for his son during the campaign. And one of the jokes was one of Kennedy's most famous lines, because one issue, aside from being a Catholic, was that this image that he was just a rich playboy out there. So uh, one day he responded, "I've just received the following wire from my generous daddy. He said, 'Dear Jack, don't buy a single vote more than is necessary. I'll be damned if I'm going to pay for a landslide.'" Well,
Yeah.
that got a big response and diffused that issue for a while, but we didn't know it was Mort Saul. And actually, Saul later claimed that when Kennedy was elected, he made jokes about Kennedy, and Kennedy's father didn't like it and got him banned from some nightclubs. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, uh, John F. Kennedy was very funny on himself during on his own, and he was good at ad libs. Also, they asked him what his favorite song was, and he said, "I think Hail to the Chief has a nice ring to it."
Hmm.
And then, of course, when he was elected, he continued in the same vein, and it was just part of his personality. He named his brother Robert Kennedy to be Attorney General. Of course, that raised some questions. And he said, "I see nothing wrong with giving him some experience as Attorney General before he goes out to practice law." Another time, a reporter asked him at a press conference if he still thought the presidency was the greatest job in the world and would he recommend it to others? And he responded, "Yes, no." But he did say he liked being president. He says, "I have a nice home, the office is close by, and the pay is good." Uh, But he also, again, like Reagan, he used humor to counter any kind of criticism. After one trip, he said, "I've been back in touch with my constituents and seeing how they felt. And frankly, I've come back to Washington from Palm Beach and I'm against my entire program." The other major thing that happened during the Kennedy administration was he created political comedy like it was never seen before. Uh, Soon after he took office, a year or two, a comedy group um, introduced this record album called The First Family, which made fun of Kennedy and his family with this comedian named Vaughn Meader, imitating John F. Kennedy's New England accent. One thing he would frequently say, "Let me say this about that."
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, first of all, I should explain for younger people, these record albums were like a, a pie plate. They were big. You played them on a phonograph. They went 33 and a third speed. But this record was such a big hit, it sold over 1 million copies in just the first 2 weeks that it was out. And it was good fun. It wasn't poking fun at it, but the old timers didn't like it. Uh, Jim Haggerty, who was used to be Eisenhower's press secretary, and he at this point he was the head of ABC TV News. He he said the this album was degrading to the presidency, and that every communist country in the world would love this record. Now, I should mention that this same guy, Jim Haggard, he was a very competent press secretary, also launched the career of the humor columnist Art Buchwald. You remember Art
Yes,
Buchwald?
yes. Hmm.
He was a great guy. Well, Art was just starting in Paris at that time when Eisenhower had a press conference there. So Buchwald wrote a funny article about this press conference. And Jim Haggerty thought it was a serious column in this Paris paper. So he put out a statement and he said this Buchwald column was unadulterated. Well, I'm losing my voice here. So Jim Haggerty put out a statement and said this Buchwald column was unadulterated rot. And so Buchwald wrote another column. He said, "Haggerty is wrong. I write adulterated rot." But anyway, JFK himself, he loved the record album. He said the only thing, his only criticism was that he thought Vaughn's Meader's impression of him was sounded more like Bobby.
Hmm. Hmm.
I guess the only thing else I could tell you about, I saw Kennedy in person once. He was the first president I ever saw in person. And I was in the Army at the time. I was at basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Hmm.
And I went up to see Ray Charles sing in Louisville. And
Hmm.
when I got there at the theater, I noticed there's a bunch of guys walking around with wires hanging out of their ears, and they were Secret Service guys. And it turned out that the Ray Charles show was being delayed for about an hour or two because President Kennedy had come into town to
Hmm.
attend a rally for a Democratic congressional candidate. So I went into the rally and I saw Kennedy speaking. I don't remember what he said, but I know he was very funny. I remember that. And then I sat in the very same seat and watched uh, Ray Charles come on. And after Kennedy left, and of course, one of the songs that Ray Charles sang was his hit record, uh, Hit the Road, Jack.
Hmm.
Then the next year, I was a reporter in the Wall Street Journal Chicago bureau. So I was there on November 22nd when we all were watching television
Hmm.
and saw Walter Cronkite say that the president had been assassinated. So I was sent out to the street to interview people in the street about President Kennedy being killed. Some of them haven't even heard it when I talked to them.
Right.
So that was and Kennedy, I remember, brought a lot of joy to the country. People really had a very positive feeling just about everything that was going on. But after this, the next week, actually, I stood in line outside the Chicago Sun-Times to get a copy of a cartoon by Bill Malden showing grieving Abraham Lincoln sitting with his head in his hands. And the thing was, the political humor died too right away, of course. Uh, there was a beat comedian named Lenny Bruce who said, Von
Yeah.
Meter is screwed, except he didn't say screwed.
Hmm.
But anyway, producers of the first Family album have removed all the copies from the market and destroyed the rest. But it's been a long time now. If you ever get a chance to hear the first Family album, it really is very funny. And it reminds us that Kennedy, when he was alive, was actually, I would say, probably the wittiest president that I've ever seen.
Hmm. I definitely will look for that copy. Thank you. There's a book and the title escapes me at the moment, but I got a hold of it a few years ago. It was one of the rare critical books of Kennedy, and it was released shortly before his assassination, and then it was pretty much not censored, but pretty much shelved. And it was just interesting because, again, Kennedy I would say nowadays is thought of course, he's martyred, and he's also thought of for the positive things you say, the inspirational and the humorous. Uh, I like I said, we could go on all day, I'm sure, with great stories. I have a quick question, and then I have a final question. So you
Sure.
mentioned Kennedy was the first president you saw in person. How many presidents in your position, I would imagine, how many presidents did you see in person, and how many did you actually get a chance to talk to?
Okay, well, that's an embarrassing question because it will show how old I am. But anyway, yes, I helped cover presidents from President Kennedy
Mhm.
to George W. Bush.
Okay.
The only president I personally met was Jimmy Carter.
Hmm.
I was on his 1976 campaign. I remember we were in Chicago for Labor Day, and he had a Labor Day parade, and the press followed him in the parade. What they did was they put us in the back of a open truck following the Kennedy limousine. We were like the cattle going through
Huh.
town,
Right.
uh, uh, waving. We all had to stand up. It was just big enough. We all had to stand up and just so we could be there with Jimmy Carter. But during that time, I did meet him, shook hands with him.
Hmm.
I've seen all the other presidents. I saw all of them in person at one time or another.
Right.
White House Correspondents' Dinner, a press conference,
Hmm.
uh, some event like that. So uh, I am happy that I was able to see them. It was a fascinating experience, and I later saw Barack Obama in person
Hmm.
also. So it's covered a long time, but a lot of fascinating stories over the years.
Absolutely. And I'd love to hear more of them, and we will definitely have you back. Uh, so Kennedy and Reagan are well known, they're popular, and they are known for their humor. Absolutely. Can you give us a surprising president, some that might not be as well known, or as well known in general, or as well known for his humor, something that might throw us a little bit and say, we never really thought of that.
Well, I mean, I think probably the last guy you think of as a joke teller would be George Washington, the
Hmm.
president's birthday we celebrate in February.
Yeah.
Washington, of course, was not a guy who told a lot of funny stories. As the first president, he was trying to establish a very serious image, which he did. But I ran across some examples of he did have a sense of humor. He used it in private. There was one story that there was a report in 1775 that he had been killed. And so after that, he gave a speech. And what he said, and I actually wrote this down, he said, as I have heard since my arrival at this place, a circumstantial account of my death and dying. I take this opportunity of contradicting the first and of showing you that I have not yet composed a speech about it.
Hmm.
This is sort of the preview to what Mark Twain said the reports of my death have been exaggerated.
Right.
But apparently, he also, I found out uh, during his cabinet meetings, he got annoyed when Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton was always late. And Hamilton said, well, his watch wasn't working. So finally, one day when he was late, Washington said, Sir, you must provide yourself a new watch or I, a new secretary.
Huh.
So he did, he was able to use it once in a while. And I'm sure when George Washington made fun of you, you paid attention.
Right. 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 Wow. Well, thank you. This was absolutely wonderful. We really appreciate you joining us. I know you have so much more to tell, and we had spoken before this recording, so I know how much you have to share, and we will definitely be fortunate if you come back again. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for listening, and stay tuned for our next podcast.